Now that Twitter's board of directors has accepted Elon Musk's takeover bid, what does this mean for Twitter? Here now is San Jose State Assistant Professor of Finance, Matthew Faulkner. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so everybody is talking about this. You can't escape this story. So why did Twitter's board of directors ultimately accept the buyout deal?
Yeah, it's a great story from a finance professor's perspective because the everyday person's talking about corporate finance right now. But the board accepted following their role of monitoring and advising the firm. Their goal is to create value for the shareholders and act in the best interest of those shareholders. And so the decision to accept the bid meant it should be those two things. That's the best interest of the shareholders. That's the proper value of the firm or overvalue of the firm. And they felt that was a fair deal.
Do you think there was any chance that they would have said no?
They tried. They put in a little roadblock with their poison pill last week to try to buy themselves time to make the decision. There obviously was no other buyers. That's the interesting story, is that there weren't a lot of other people who must have been interested. That's usually what happens, is another buyer may come in and try to offer more. It seems like it was their last resort, other than trying to just run the company as it was.
I mean, how many people can actually make a purchase like this or would even want to purchase Twitter?
Yeah, well, not many of us could get access to $44 billion to purchase Twitter. But why would you want to? Obviously, speaking from what Elon Musk has shared, that free speech is a major component. I think there's a lot more to it. If we start to think about Twitter, I don't use it, but I know a lot of friends that do, is it hasn't changed much. It's been public for 9 years. It's been, a company for a lot longer, and it hasn't changed much since its initiation, but all these other social media platforms have evolved. So I think it's a great platform, but I do think there must be more potential to be unlocked, and Elon Musk sees that.
And you just mentioned it's been public for 9 years. What would change as it goes private? And how long would it even take for it to get to that point?
Yeah, it could take as long as a year for it to fully play out. Obviously, when you're working with $44 billion and financing this process, there's just time that it takes to get everything, dot your I's and cross your T's. The privatization, we might not see a lot of changes in the functionality of Twitter immediately. I think that the reason to go private is he has more flexibility, or the people running the company have more flexibility to make a decision on a whim rather than appeasing to thousands and thousands of shareholders.
All right. So the agreement isn't quite final yet. What still needs to happen for it to become a done deal?
Right. So always the board has accepted the offer. So in that sense, it's done. But until $44 billion shows up, and the $54.20 gets paid to anybody who owns a single share of Twitter, there's always regulatory hoops that could come up. This may come from political parties, whether it be right or left. If they have problems with this happening, it could come from who are the investors, which it doesn't appear so from what we know so far. But if there are foreign entities that are investors in part of this buyout, that could implement the U.S. government to pause and make sure that user data is going to be safe. Those would be little things that could come up, but right now we don't have any of that information, and it appears it's as close to a done deal as we can say.
Yeah, this story is not over yet for sure. I'm sure we'll see a lot of things happening before it's finally completed. But so what's next for Twitter, and how does it plan to create value in the future at this point?
Yeah, it seems if we look at the value of Twitter in terms of stock price over its 9-year public life, it's hit this $54.20 in two separate occasions solely out of 9 years of being a publicly traded company. So obviously the growth of the company has been relatively slow. I'm gonna say what has been said is that there's an edit button, or maybe there's a payment system, whether that be through regular currency or cryptocurrency. There's the subscription service attached to it. So all those factors, plus any new things that, Elon Musk being on the cutting edge of innovation probably has in mind that some of us have never thought about.
And before you go, I just want to talk about the fact that this is something that a lot of people should be thinking about. I mean, not everyone uses Twitter. A lot of people in media obviously do. Finance people have their eyes on it with the stocks and everything. Why should just your regular Joe Schmo care? Someone who doesn't even look at Twitter, know about Twitter, invest in Twitter. Why should people care about this?
Yeah, from a finance perspective, I would say there's other than the learning aspect of how corporate finance may work, there's probably not a lot of concern. But I know from outside of my field, the whole social media, news, misinformation, hate speech, the areas we meet to talk with each other have been under major scrutiny, especially in the past 5 years, but for the livelihood of those companies. So from a regular person, that would probably be where your interests lie in terms of concern more than from the finance perspective.
Mm-hmm. Bigger picture there. All right. Well, Matthew Faulkner with San Jose State, thanks so much for discussing this with us today.
Of course, thank you for having me.